A noose was closing around the Dwarven fleet. Norse and Chaos ships were moving to intercept from all directions, and the dwarves could do little to maneuver away. For starters, they had all their ships tied together to allay various nautical fears, which now meant that they had to sail all or nothing into whatever Chaos had for them. The ships on the outside were too far away to shout to, and the ships on the inside couldn't get clear shots on the perimeter. It was the perfect situation for the Chaos Raiders to collapse upon, right in the middle of the southern sea. Dark ironclads drove into the sides of the overfilled convoy. Hulls cracked and tipped over, while there was little for gunners to shoot at, as the Chaos decks were high up and lined with shields. The Norse raiding ships were easier targets, but not helpless. They got in close and threw heavy javelins trailing ropes, snaring prey. Then eager bands of berserkers dragged themselves in for close combat. Here the Dawi were most at home, but rocking, leaky ships were no place for the Legion's well-drilled formations to shine. The outer layer of Dawi craft were soon sunk or left crewless. The whole formation could no longer move, surrounded by foes. This made them easy targets for Chaos Hell Cannons, launching that slow purple plasma into the fleet. When it collided with masts and hulls, it exploded violently, creating a storm of splinters more deadly than the blast itself. "We've got to shoot back! Take those land crawlers apart if you have to!" Oldor shouted. In the holds of the larger ships sat land crawlers, and within them were the big guns, suitable for returning fire. Some rapid engineering work had to take place to extract the weapons from their mounts and rapidly reinstall them on the deck. There was hardly time to brace the cannons properly. They needed to be fired immediately. Here, Story stepped in to help. "I'll hold the back, string some handles below and brace it, now!" he shouted. Quickly a gang of legionnaires had a cannon held on their shoulders, with Story tilting himself against the rear breach with all his strength. They together formed a mobile turret that could point out into the messy fighting around them. When the cannon was fired, it kicked up into the air and knocked all the Dawi over, then clunked back down while everyone scrambled out of the way. "I expected worse. Again!" Story called. Grumbling only inaudibly, the legionaries picked the gun up again. Perhaps it was worth it. A huge crack at the waterline was sinking a Norse ship. There was some success at rebuffing boarding actions on the ships that were carrying gunners. Dark powder cartridges could punch right through enemy hulls, even the armoured Chaos hulks. Only problem was that most of the rifles had been damaged on campaign, and the makeshift repairs weren't enough to keep them shooting more than a handful of times. And it did little to help when a bolt of plasma struck down from above and flung crew from the decks in violent blasts. Oldor powerlessly swung around his rifle, looking for some perfect shot that would somehow rectify things. But wherever he looked, he saw his boats rocking, tipping, or sliding lower into the water. This could have been the end of his expedition, yet the expedition of another was nigh. There were flashes of white light in the west. Long-tailed bolts of blinding energy came from the horizon at unthinkable speed, crashing into the Chaos boats and cutting them cleanly apart. Grabbing his telescope and looking to the west, Oldor saw an island. It grew larger with each moment he observed it. Its high cliffs were lined with wavy battlements forged from purple steel, the architectural fashion of the Druki, the so-called Dark Elves. Yet those white beams, still flying into the battle, were like no weapon of the Nagarathi wastes from which the Druki hailed. In the moment, though, this was nothing to sniff at. "It's striking them down. What is it?" Story asked. "That's a black ark," Oldor replied. "They're going to save us, surely?" "Yes, but they say that to see an ark is a bad omen. Usually, it becomes the last thing you'll see." "Then we'll take our chances at their mercy instead of that of Chaos, shall we? Come on." The Dawi ships were rallied by the bombardment, which cut a path west through the Chaos fleet. The Chaos ships seemed to realize their predicament and disengaged wherever they could. Now though, it was the dwarves using hooks and ropes to keep a few in place. Decks were stormed and grudges swiftly tended to with overwhelming force. It did little to make up for the loss of 10 ships and 20 crews, but the blow felt softer for this slaughter all the same. The island, the floating fortress, grew closer, moving under the power of no visible sail or oars, nor trailing any engine smoke. It moved quickly. The Dawi could not have escaped it if they wanted to. At the island's base was a wide harbour, its moats like mandibles. All ships still afloat took the hint as this jaw enveloped them and moved to moor up. Once the ropes were in place, there was a stillness. No Dawi wanted to emerge, and only a few could tolerate the cocktail of uncertainty and indignity this dark rescue served them. Yet, the darkness of the rescue wasn't to meet the picture in their imaginations. To these sinister docks came a delegation of lock-stepped elves in white robes, bright against the dire battlements around them. Seeing them, Oldor finally clanked ashore in full armour, watched by countless eyes from the cracks and holes of the moored fleet. He met the elves on the salty dockside and waited for them to speak. The uniform body of robed Elgi parted, and from within their number came a woman in a sea-green dress, wearing a golden headdress that projected auburn hair into a curving fountain down her back. She wielded a staff as tall as she was, tall for an elf, and even taller to a dwarf. Notably, she was over-thin, her hands on the staff appearing almost like claws, and her eyes were captured in black rings of fatigue. Not an uncommon appearance for any in those times, but unheard of for an elf, much less the High Everqueen Alariel, as she introduced herself.
"Fear not the idols of our enthralled kin," she said, gesturing at the island fortress above them. "The plague of chaos strikes the Nagarothi with equal malice, and weapons of hated wars become timeless treasures."
"Ah, you've put your differences aside, have you?" Oldor asked.
"Rather, they have been taken aside, my friend. We have them to thank for our survival, and indeed so does your wispish host. Here."
Alariel moved her staff in an arc around her. Suddenly, Oldor noticed that the entire harbour was lined with dark elf soldiers, clad in purple metal and brilliant turquoise scales. Grumbling was heard from the ships. "Well, I don't think we have anything suitable to repay your kindness, Majesty. But thanks, that we can offer by the cartload."
"There is something more we would have,"
Alariel said, stepping closer.
"The gods are not without power, even now. It was you we sought, and you we find in your hour of need. Only one verse of their will remains. Return to us any of our kin your vaults might harbour."
"To tell you the truth, Majesty, I haven't been to those vaults in a long time. I've no idea where to find any refugee Elgi we might have taken on, or what's become of them."
"Then we go together. Your ships will be safe here. I understand the Bay of Coffer is your foremost port."
Aye. Although it's a quicker march to the Karax from Alhaik, it's just south of here."
"Such things are understood. The route to our havens lies west, though, and I think it best we make use of all the time we have left with considered efficiency."
"Not so adverse to considered efficiency myself, Majesty. I suppose that means you won't be wanting room and board."
"We decline, warmly welcoming the offer we had hoped still remained after your time in the grips of chaos. Our celestial redoubts await, opening to witness the last gasps of the age. We shall be away, and return when the next age of mortal life is born."
"Soon, I hope."
"Do not be disheartened. We flee not for lack of faith. We seal ourselves such that the coming age of darkness be not eternal by the twisting of our powers, and that in the forge of chaos there shall be specks of what is pure, unbroken. Of all the life that drew breath, only you can reflect the eternal mountains in your minds. I should like to see what you have become when the vorpal web is broken once again in a distant aeon of spring."
"Yes, pleasure to meet you too," Oldor nodded awkwardly. So it was that this alliance of Elgi and Druki ferried the expedition quickly to the western coast of Araby, where the wide Bay of Coffer and its half-rebuilt docklands could at least partially shelter the huge ark. It should be noted that dwarves and elves had a long-standing distrust of each other, based almost entirely on both sides of the table assessing themselves to be better at one thing or another than their differently heighted companions. In this case though, knowing that their time together was short, and that there at Coffer was gathered the greater part of those known to be alive anywhere in the world but Atalan, the dwarven camaraderie just about managed to extend to the elves. And with the Dark Elves, there was an unexpected bond, forged most likely in the chaotic fields of the old world. Both Druki and Dawi felt the powers of darkness stroking at them from within. Joking about it together robbed it of its power to corrupt in private, and the Chaos Gods seethed as ale halls were filled with rude chants that took their names in vain. Such festivities were short-lived, for returning to Atalan proved to be no escape from the tribulations of the age. The land had enjoyed some protection from Chaos corruption in the past for a simple reason: its irrelevance. Having been promoted to the crown jewel of the Untainted, it was now a prime target for the hidden puppeteers. The Umgi of the realm, native and refugee alike, had been torn apart from the inside by the scourge of corruption. It was not even the corruption itself that presented the biggest problem, but the fear of it. No one could be trusted, and almost any symptom, quirk, or turn of phrase could be spun into a damning indication of imminent madness. There was even some fighting in Coffer, as the residents willingly mistook the arriving ark for an enemy invasion. In their defense, arks had the look and reputation to make this a reasonable assumption. In short, lines of communication were shaky to gone, and so actually locating the elves Alarielle was looking for was difficult. Elves had been among the refugees from all over, in small numbers, remnants of an already small diaspora spread among the humans and dwarves for one reason or another. Oldor ordered the local garrison troops to go out and find word on the roads. However, these troops were stuck to their coastal posts in a state of permanent panic, hardly listening to anything but the voices in their heads. These were Dawi too, for whom the voices were usually quiet enough to reason with. Indeed, the surface of the world was increasingly the domain of chaos, and few had skulls thick enough to deny these new masters entry. Ultimately, a band of elves accompanied Oldor in a march through the underways to reach the Carracks. Everyone felt better underground, even the elves. It was peaceful below, with grumpy waystation guards seeming as eager to resume their naps as ever. The Carracks too proved a stark contrast to the surface. While they were crowded, they were subdued and well-ordered. A summons was issued, and all elves tucked away in the stone city appeared to bow to their everqueen. The Dawi too were quite interested in the vibrantly dressed, pompously tall delegation. The disparate elves obeyed the command of their monarch with neither cheer nor grumble. Just another reason the Dawi couldn't trust them. While preparations to leave were made, Oldor demanded to show Alarielle the more impressive halls and reaches of the mighty Vulture Mountain Carrack. Behind its towering door to the surface was a maze of castles and winding passages, with firing ports and crafted walkways for hidden defenders to harry victims. Below that was the wide assembly chamber, a natural cave lit by countless rune lights chained to the jagged ceiling. This was where the Dawi trained for open battle, although at that time it was a mess of shacks and tents. While the Carrack proper began below this, Oldor took the elves to see the huge hall at the end of the assembly chamber. It was flanked by floor-to-ceiling statues of ancient heroes, some restored from the time of the heroes themselves. Through more impractically large doors was the throne room, a room Oldor had scarcely used in his time as High Lord. As he stood at the bottom of the deep steps to the grey throne, he couldn't help but think of Thorgrin.
"You are troubled by the task of taking this throne," Alarielle deduced.
"Nay, it's more the fate of the one who should be on it. I fear we had something to do with his demise," Oldor said plainly.
The course of history is winding, and no one bend lays claim to where it meets the present, not the first nor the final. Chaos magic is enthralling, overpowering, and leaves those who recover from its ravages hollow and prone to vices of mortal design. You should be proud of what you have achieved. Your people have more than the gods provided. So it shall be while they have you. I wonder if you would be willing to take on a further burden.
I don't consider my people a burden, Majesty, but do go on.
The darkness already begins to settle in the hearts of these precious holds. Humans are a capricious species to be pasturing above, and even dwarves are not the pillars of pure stone they imagine. When I leave, you will be set upon by the will of chaos long before their soldiers tread the sands. There is no hope.
Thanks for that then, Oldor scoffed.
I speak in error. There is one hope, and it is you. You must tie the binds of chaos to yourself. You must become one with the twisted corruption, so that in its overpowering darkness there can be nothing close to it, just as stars fade as the sun passes by.
You're asking me to give in to chaos?
No, I am commanding it.
Alarielle lifted her long golden scepter, which gleamed an unbearable white. There was a single slow flash, like a wave of warm light. Then she dropped the scepter to the ground. It shattered into a black dust, which then sparked into a flame. Guards around the room rushed forwards, and more poured in from outside. Story was at the head of them. "What are you doing, sorceress?" the Thane demanded.
Anchoring the vortex. You are safe now, she said.
What does that even mean? You won't leave without explanation, Elgi trickster.
If you seek explanation, then listen. Listen for the call of chaos. Can you hear it?
You've fallen already, haven't you? You're no more than a cultist.
Listen, dwarf!
Alarielle boomed, her devastating eyes wide and enthralling. Story listened. The room was silent as all present did the same. Something was missing. A few looked around themselves, searching for a lost source. There could be no doubt. The bristling hum that had grown into a constant companion in the prior months was gone.
You banished the voice of chaos. How?
Story slowly asked. Alarielle looked then to Oldor. He was standing completely still, staring into the distance. When everyone started looking at him, he turned his back to face the throne. Then he began removing pieces of his armor.
This is quite a burden indeed,
he said quietly. He stepped to the throne and sat with the utmost care. His breathing was shallow and rapid. Are you okay, my lord? Story asked, approaching the throne. Oldor raised a hand to hold him.
They're coming. They're coming right now, he said. Chaos armies. Chaos everything. Aye, it's a charm that you can't hear them. Aye, that will serve you well. Serve us all. Aye.
He trailed off. Story turned back to Alarielle. You've hexed our corruption onto him, is that it?
Forever. Although that is not long now,
Alarielle said with a bow. She walked away, with Story and others in close pursuit, their questions unanswered. On the throne, Oldor gripped the arms.
I'll nae serve you, but aye, battle, I can offer you that from the mountain top to the heat of the endless below.
Hazy in his mind's eye, the gods of chaos accepted the offer.